Well, there's less than a week until the Treasury's estimated default deadline, and there's no deal to raise the debt ceiling yet. President Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy have said that they're closer to a deal, though, but so far the agreement remains elusive. So for more on this, I want to bring in former communications director for Vice President Harris and then Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Ashley Etienne. She's also a CBS News political contributor. And CBS News political analyst and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez is also joining us now. All right, good to see you guys, ladies. As per usual, that's how I know it's Friday.
I know.
The ladies are here.
Ladies are here.
So I want to start with what both sides are saying about the debt ceiling negotiations. I want to play a clip.
Speaker McCarthy and I have a very different view of who should bear the burden of additional efforts to get our fiscal house in order. I don't believe the whole burden should fall on the backs of middle class and working class Americans. My House Republican friends disagree.
We have to spend less this year than we spent last year. We've never been in a place like this where you had the highest debt in history, spending the most money in history, but having the most money come in.
So, Ashley, the Republicans have made some concessions. They say they're being reasonable in their demands. Do you think that's accurate?
No, I think it's absolutely accurate. I think both sides are making concessions. I've talked to my former colleagues in the White House, and they're feeling very optimistic about where negotiations are. Here's the thing, both Biden and McCarthy are sort of operating with their political futures in mind, right? Joe Biden doesn't want to have a default on his watch, especially going into the next presidential, nor does McCarthy want to lose his speakership over this issue as well. So I think this debate is going to come down to the moderates who are going to give McCarthy cover on the spending cuts and who are going to give Biden cover on work mandates. So that's where I think this thing is going to fall, and it's going to fall down to the moderates and then also who's going to blink. But again, I think there's a lot of progress being made. There's still a lot of time, And then one other factor I should say, I've seen these battles happen both from the White House perspective and from the Speaker's office in the past. And some of the tough decisions can be punted to the next cycle and the next negotiation. The point is no one wants a default now. I think they're making really great strides in concessions, and it's going to be the moderates who are going to make sort of both sides become very sober about the prospects of moving forward.
Let's see your take on it.
Well, the reason I sort of feel like the American people, when they watch this happen time and time again,
I know
they and it comes down to, and we're having a discussion here about what the Democrats' perspective is and what the Republicans' perspective is, but it all really matters on who's actually in the Oval Office and who controls Congress, right? Because Leslie, as you know, one of President Trump's legacies is that the national debt under his administration rose by almost $7.8 trillion during his time in office. And that debt was rising before the pandemic. But now a Democrat's in the Oval Office, and all of a sudden Republicans are concerned, as you heard Speaker McCarthy saying, about spending. I mean, is it just about politics when the average American looks at what's happening in Washington?
That's a really interesting point. Right now, I think you could argue that there's a sober sense, a sense of reality collectively across the United States with respect to this rising debt. People are managing their own pocketbooks with more scrutiny, and they certainly expect the government to do the same. Those are their tax dollars. Now, that argument historically has been the case, judicious, responsible, fiscally conservative with your tax money. But we lost that argument. I think Republicans and Democrats both have lost the argument. You can look back, and I thought Ashley made a really important point historically. Former Speaker Newt Gingrich in 1995, when they had the 21-day shutdown of the federal government for the same thing, he said it hurt the Republican Party. It dissolved the public trust. And at a time right now when public trust is so minimum in terms of its support, the onus is on both parties to come together, which is something you don't really see in Washington that much. But I will say for Republicans, they really have to stand the line and hold the line, which is why I think you're hearing about only a 2-year agreement as opposed to a 10-year, which gets you to the next presidential cycle. So behind closed doors, let's see what another administration would look like in terms of stronger, bigger cuts. That's going to be the Republican argument.
Leslie, let me ask you about two more people throwing their hat into the ring for the 2024 election, Senator Tim Scott and Governor Ron DeSantis. They both raised a lot of money in the 24 hours after they declared, but Ron DeSantis raised more. He says, over $8 million in the 24 hours after he launched his campaign. But as I understand it, he has a considerable war chest, perhaps bigger than the other candidates combined. Is that going to put him ahead? And is that going to put the others in a position where it's going to be very difficult to catch up if money is the factor?
I think if we want to ask if money is the factor, we can look at, Michael Bloomberg spending over $1 billion last cycle to be the Democratic nominee. Money is not going to be the part that closes the gap. You have to have an apparatus. You have to have a base of support. You have to have a record to show that can be replicated on a national level. Governors tend to do that. America has this kind of long love affair with governors traditionally. Senate didn't used to be a way station for the presidency, but things have changed in recent times. I think he has that advantage, but the war chest, the delta between Ron DeSantis and everyone else is massive, almost to the tune of over $90 million. So playing catch up in terms of wrangling wealthy donors to come together behind a national presidential campaign is no small feat. And I think he has a clear advantage along with our former president, Donald Trump.
And Ashley, you wanted to jump in on that.
No, I did. I mean, I think what's interesting here is how these billionaires are playing an outsized role in the presidential elections. I mean, they're rolling, all of these candidates, and each one of them is playing to their sugar daddy. I mean, to me, that was the story that was lost in the launch on Twitter. Elon Musk is reported to be a supporter of DeSantis's, right? And so I think that's partly why he decided to launch on Twitter, right? Is you've got this billionaire that's making enormous amounts of commitments in terms of money to his candidacy. So I think that's the story that really hasn't been fully told, which is these billionaires that are bankrolling and the outsized influence of dark money, which is no longer dark anymore, right, in politics, and how it's really, nullifying the impact of the average voter.
Ashley, I think that's a really good point. I mean, even the former president, who we've talked about in polls, is sort of ahead of everyone else. I know things are just really starting, but, a lot of his donations, as I understand it, Leslie, they're small money donations, and Ron DeSantis is, out raising and maybe will eventually be outspending.
It's a small, and just kind of end on that point, those small money donations are really the big talking point. Think of Bernie Sanders, you could argue about Donald Trump saying that. That was showing groundswell support outside the traditional party labels. And, George Soros, Republicans would argue, yes, on the left and the right, there are these figures that wield tremendous political power with those dark dollars that people want to see, who they're funding. And the appetite has changed in America. People want more transparency. And they want to feel that they're engaged directly with these candidates. So it's going to be a different type of presidential election looking forward.
All right. Leslie Sanchez, Ashley Etienne, thank you both very, very much. Enjoy your weekend. Be safe.
Happy holidays.